Hello, and welcome to episode 77 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. We're here today with Mike Durso, Montgomery County Board of Education member, former Springbrook High School principal, and a former principal from Arlington and D.C. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Good to be with you.
Glad to have you. So the first question I'd like to pose to you is what are you currently doing, or what have you ever done to advance the public interest, and why?
Well, interesting question. Prior to coming on the board, I had a 44-year career in public education. I've been a teacher, I've been an assistant principal, I've been a middle school principal, I've been a high school principal. I've worked in 3 different jurisdictions, Washington, D.C., Arlington, Virginia, and finishing up in Montgomery County. So I think I've had a good opportunity to see a number of things in the field of education. I'd like to think I've made an impact, but the jury might still be out on that. And now being on the Board of Education as the current president, we have some significant challenges ahead of us. That's not new. There's always challenges in education, but I think I think public education might be at a bit of a crossroads right now. I think there's probably a bit of a lack of faith in public education. I think we're going to see some interesting things happening with the new administration coming in under Mr. Trump, and so I think we're really going to have to redouble our efforts to make sure that we are in a position of serving all students well, and I'm not sure that's always happened.
So why do you think that we are at a crossroads in public education? Why would anyone have anything but trust and faith in the efficacy of public education, especially in Montgomery County, Maryland?
Well, I think the easy answer is I think a lot of our institutions are being challenged now, and whether that's right or wrong, I think that's a reality. I think also because we have been growing in such unprecedented numbers, the crunch, for want of a better term, for space, for recruiting teachers, for retaining teachers, for being able to serve all students. I think that's maybe caused some people to just wonder if we're on track and doing what we are supposed to. And I understand that. I don't know that I can refute some of those concerns.
So you mentioned overcrowding as an issue just now, and you mentioned many different challenges that you're facing as the leader, the president of the Montgomery County Board of Education. What other challenges are you facing? Or actually, it may be most interesting to our listeners to consider some of the challenges that you encountered in the past that you rose to meet, and then hear a little bit about what happened with those challenges from the past.
Well, previously, most of my career in education was in Washington, D.C. I'm from D.C., born and raised there, went to school there, the whole bit. D.C. as a school system was almost as large as Montgomery County at one time, and then a number of different issues created a drop in enrollment, and there were some stark differences within the city that frequently ended up on racial or socioeconomic lines. Those concerns, I think, are not particularly seen in just one place now. I think the plight of our urban cities has spread. I think we have a lot of urban issues outside city limits. We are as a system, we're urban, we're suburban, we're rural, we're a little bit of everything. So I think that's a unique challenge that we have in addition to our growth. Give you an example. When I was in Washington, D.C., the enrollment in the school system was probably about 95% African American. Those numbers over a period of years have changed, but now in D.C., unlike Maryland, which is not a particularly charter-friendly state, nearly half of D.C. students are charter students. So that's a challenge that's taken place over the years. Arlington, for me, was a very different experience. A smaller bureaucracy, about 25 schools compared to Montgomery County with 204. So I got a good chance to see how maybe a different size bureaucracy worked. But again, some of the same issues, just maybe on a smaller scale. Second language learners, immigrants, poverty, change in demographics, all of those issues that I'm not sure anybody has really come to grips with in terms of a solution that works, because it's so complex. So then fast forward to Montgomery County, where I was a principal for 13 years before retiring and joining the board, and this county, as you know, has also gone through some significant changes, say in the last generation. And I think the challenge before us now is to not fall into the trap of not being able to serve those students who achieve and do well, but also be able to address those who are not doing well for whatever reason, and dealing with growth, which is a huge issue, changing demographics, and all those different things that go into a school system of 160,000 students.
So you mentioned that the demographics change in Montgomery County, and you're mentioning also that you have changing socioeconomic status and demographics and poverty. You also mentioned that poverty is a challenge facing the school system. What exactly do you think the school system is being asked too much, instead of just being asked to account for education and to provide a good education to all students, that the school system is being asked to be a catch-all or a safety net for all the social ills plaguing America?
In a perfect world, schools would just educate and not have to deal with so many of the other issues that kind of come along with it. But we're not in a perfect world, and I think schools are called on to do quite a bit beyond their initial mission of educating students. But I don't think we can just throw our hands up and say, "Hey, that's not our problem." It's not our problem to feed students. It's not our problem to provide counseling services. It's not our problem. If kids come in language deficient, well, they shouldn't be. Well, I mean, the reality is all those issues exist, and if no one is going to pick up the slack, or if other agencies, be they public and private, either can't or won't do that, then it falls on the school. That probably is not equitable, but it is what it is, and I think we're called on to do a lot more than probably our resources allow.
So, as a member of the educational community for a significant period of time, have you ever considered yourself to be an advocate, right, for, let's say, for a different funding stream from the state legislature or from the county council to say, more fund, we need to create a stronger social safety net? Have you ever found yourself in a position where you were advocating for a tougher stance on poverty to make sure that the kids are ready to learn when they present at school, and that isn't if it's better, what I hear you saying is it's better that the school system address it than nobody, but that's not the most equitable or efficient means of going about making sure that we have an equitable society. So have you ever found yourself kind of working?
Well, yeah, but most of my experience working in schools was pretty much hands-on with day-to-day school issues. So this is probably a little different arena. But I guess I would leave or feel much more comfortable with that advocacy role to probably be more with some of other elected leaders, our legislators in Annapolis, state officials, etc. Because one cannot squeeze blood out of a turnip, and there's some people that feel that the funding we have now. I mean, Montgomery County, a $2.4 billion budget. Some people would say, well, how can you feel strapped with that kind of money? And I understand that, but the needs are just so great, and I think our society as a whole has generally paid lip service to the needs of education, and especially public education, which is why I'd have to say I worry a little bit about what the posture of the incoming administration is going to be towards education.
So are you worried about charter schools?
I'm not as worried about charter schools. I'm worried that the focus of maybe the administration, or specifically the education department federally, may not necessarily be on local schools or local school systems. There's just a different mindset. So yeah, I think charters will be a part of the thrust that we see. I think vouchers will be there.
Sure.
And we're going to have to deal with that and be able to make a case that that public education needs to remain a significant player also. I'm not sure everybody believes that right now.
And so you spoke earlier about relationships with other elected officials. Now, your $2.4 billion budget that you have for Montgomery County Public Schools, it doesn't come from you, it comes from the County Council and the Maryland General Assembly.
Correct.
So can you talk a little bit about the relationships you have with those legislators and those bodies who do appropriate the funds for capital and operational budgets for MCPS that you use as a Board of Education member?
Well, I think last budget season might be a good example of when we can join forces. The county council took the unprecedented step of enacting a property tax increase, knowing that all there had to do would be one person to break ranks, and it wasn't going to happen. That was pretty significant.
And for our listeners, the thing that Mike Durso just referred to is that there is an amendment to the county charter that says that in order to increase property taxes, the Montgomery County Council must have not only a unanimous vote, but 9 full votes out of 9 members. So if one is absent, you can't raise a tax. You have to have all 9 members vote to raise the property tax, and that is indeed what happened only a few months ago.
So I'm not naive enough to think that's going to happen again. Probably a good chance that it won't. I mean, the county council, they stuck their neck out, and term limits may have been a byproduct of that, because I don't know that everybody was thrilled with that.
And for our listeners, just to keep them up to date, Mr. Durso just referred to term limits, which was a ballot referendum in Montgomery County that just passed, which would limit Montgomery County council members and the Montgomery County executive to 3 consecutive terms. So, so to speak, the moons were all lined up in a favorable position for us, but that is not likely to happen again.
and our growth has not slowed down. Actually, it's increased. There's not a lot of extra space in the county for schools. Parents are not thrilled with overcrowded schools or schools that are getting large. So all of that is on our plate for the future.
But aren't you also finding that as you have more students added to the population, you also get more revenues because there's a particular formula in the legislature to calculate funding for public education that's dependent in large part due to per pupil funding? And also, if you're having more people move into the county, aren't you also seeing tax revenues rise from property taxes as new units are constructed and new people move in?
Well, the easy answer is yes, but I think when you look a little bit deeper, we're also having a significant number of kids and family move into the county where their needs are probably greater than, say, what the needs of somebody moving in a generation ago was, especially if it's a language issue or if it's a family in poverty. And some of the issues that follow that end up at the schoolhouse.
And those are kind of some of the demographic challenges and the shift of urban problems to Montgomery County that you spoke of earlier. So you mentioned that there are almost 3 different types of Montgomery County. There's an urban, a suburban, and a rural. How do you address the challenges, and what are the challenges of trying to manage a school system that caters to all 3 of those categories?
Well, I think that's both the challenge and the opportunity. One size does not fit all, and maybe it should not. Basically, and I've felt this for a long time, I still think kids are kids and parents are parents and teachers are teachers. Probably a little different baggage here and there, and that's understandable. But a family living in the agricultural reserve wants as much for their students as a family in Bethesda, and as a family in Silver Spring, in Gaithersburg. Wherever. So I think there's more similarities than differences, but there's some different challenges in different communities.
So what really keeps you awake at night? What worries you about the school system on a daily basis?
I don't know if I could prioritize these, but I think growth is a major concern. I think our recruitment and retaining teachers is important. Teaching is a great profession. I can't say enough for it. I worry sometimes, though, that we have made the profession unattractive to maybe young people, high school students, college students, to go into that profession. We've got to do a better job.
So you've been working on workforce development issues?
Well, I've probably been more involved in some of the kind of the nuts and bolts issues of recruitment and retaining teachers. I think one thing, as a former principal, I'm pretty much convinced, although salary is important, I don't think that's why people leave the profession.
Why do they leave?
Support in what they're doing. I don't even think it has to do with facilities, although it's great to teach in a new building with
you mean emotional support or structural support? Support
in learning how to and becoming a teacher. Generally, the support at the local level from the school administration.
Now that's interesting because Maryland is often considered to be one of the the places with the best public education in the country, and within Maryland, Montgomery County is considered to have the best public education within the state. So you're really talking about one of the elite public education systems in the entire United States, and and you're saying that you are having trouble retaining good teachers.
I think in general that is accurate, but you could also put it in this way, and I'm not sure if I would necessarily agree with all your descriptors, but for the sake of discussion, let's say what you just mentioned is accurate. Then that tells you if we're at that pinnacle, and I'm not sure we are, then what does that say for the rest of the country, or what does that say for urban education, or what does that say for rural education? So it's.
What does America need to be doing differently in terms of educating the youth?
I don't think we've ever been completely honest about how important education is. I mean, we just finished a very contentious presidential campaign season, and I don't think you heard much about education.
Why is education so important? Is it just to create new individuals who are capable of getting jobs? Is it for economic development? Is that the reason? Are we trying to create citizens who can vote in an informed fashion? What are we trying to create with this education? Why is it so important?
I think all of the above. I think obviously an educated citizenry is important for our democracy and for our whole way of life to continue. But I don't think one can overlook the practical aspects of getting an education, and then you hear about the stereotypical college student who's back home in their parents' basement, and there are probably more of those cases than most people realize. So I think it runs the gamut.
And if America were to be honest with how important education is, what would America's response be?
If we were really honest, I think we'd put our money where our mouth is, and I think we would. It's not all about resources, but I think teacher training. I think teacher salaries. I think the condition of our schools.
But it's often said that Washington, D.C. spends more per pupil than any other jurisdiction in the nation, yet D.C. often has pretty mediocre or worse educational outcomes. I'm not an expert in education, so you've taught in D.C., but it seems to me that throwing money at a problem isn't necessarily the best solution to.
No, I think it's how you spend the money. Now, keep in mind, I think one can get overly enamored with test scores, and with test scores being the indicator of success. Part of the reason, and per pupil expenditures don't always tell the whole story, but part of the reason that a lot of the urban centers have higher per pupil expenditures is frequently there are more veteran teachers there who make a higher salary, and then you also have some significant needs in a lot of our urban centers that other schools do not have, special education, for example. So it's extraordinarily complex.
So as we reach the end of this podcast, I'd like to add, you come with such a rich background in education to the Board of Education. You have been a principal in many different types of schools in multiple jurisdictions. You've been in rural areas, urban areas, suburban areas. You've been in D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. So can you reflect on your career in public, or how you, in your career in education, and how you see that career in education as being a career in public service, and how your very many different experiences have allowed you to be a better public servant and to better serve Montgomery County Public Schools?
Well, this is going to sound very self-serving, but I think all of these experiences in different communities and different schools and working in different bureaucracies has given me some insights as to what can work and what doesn't and why not. I think we sometimes tend to oversimplify, what goes into a successful school. Why is school A successful and school B is struggling, and maybe they're serving the same type of population. I think a lot of it boils down to who is hired, who's running the school, are the resources ample? I don't think the resources need to be, just flowing endlessly. But how do you use the money? How are we as a system using that $2.5 billion? Because that ought to be getting us maybe further than some people think we're going. So we got our work cut out for us. But I think we're heading in the right direction, and I'm very pleased with where we are now, currently in Montgomery County with our superintendent. He's been a quick study, very unimpressed with himself. I think he has his eye on the prize just in terms of what needs to be done. And if we can all get on the same page, I think we're going to see some successes.
So that has been Mike Durso, member of the Montgomery County Board of Education, who speaks about his long and varied career in education as having been a career that has successively allowed him to gain experience and expertise that has informed his decision-making process. And throughout the course of his career, he has been interested in producing better students and an improved school system. He has the ability to honestly look himself in the mirror and look at his own school district and acknowledge that there are some significant challenges facing the school system, while also being able to acknowledge all the progress that he has made over the course of his career. So, Mike, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas.
And this has been episode 77 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.